Hey everyone, welcome to Manny's Mic Locker number 2. We made it. Wow. I hope you can stick around this episode because not only did Rumble smoke, I'm going to show you a breakdown of some of the mics that we use, which we'll be profiling. One of them is Dr. Alien's mic, the other one is Peluso, and the other one is Lawton. So make sure you stick around. I'll have a Pro Tools breakdown of what we did and how we did it. But first off, we're going to see Mike Bridavsky. He's in the Midwest. He has a wonderful microphone collection. He also produced the new Deerhoof record. Do yourself a favor, go check it out. It is just ear candy. And his style and technique has a lot to do with why I even wanted to have a show called Manny's Mic Locker, because I was so blown away by his style. It really motivated me to make sure that we could share new recording techniques, how to use mics. Some of these aren't vintage. They are hard to find, but it's for everyone. You can definitely find a mic in any budget to make this happen. Also, the mics that we're featuring are completely brand new. You can go out right now and buy them, and that was always important to me. So Manny's Mic Locker number 2. Let's go. We're off to see Mike, and we're off to see the wizard. So here we are. I called you. What's going on? Okay, I know you have a sick console, but for right now, we're going to censor that. Let's get straight to the meat and potatoes, man. Tell us about your mics.
I'm stoked to be on the show. Thanks for having me, Manny. I do have a mic problem. Pretty serious mic problem. Yeah. I don't know if you can. My buddy Will here is shooting, and so Manny, I'm probably far away from the camera you're looking at, but so here, see, I just stepped on one. That's how insane it is. So let me explain what's going on here. I texted you today. I said, people are going to think
I know what's going on there. There's a problem. Yeah, that's what's going on.
There's a problem, a serious problem. But okay, so my background is that I've been obsessed with recording since I was 15. So that's 1995. I decided right away that's what I was going to do for a living, and I started doing it right away, and I pretty much haven't stopped. I got an internship at Electrical Audio with Steve and Greg. This is 2002, so we share that in common, that we both kind of started there and were heavily inspired by such an amazing studio and amazing group of engineers, and Steve is so generous and wealthy with his information. You know, I was a 22-year-old kid. I was probably super annoying, but he still put up with me. And, you know, and same as you, you know, he's just a great guy. And then when I was there, when I discovered all these tube Lomo mics, it really blew my mind.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And he told me something, you know, I was like, one of the things I talked to him, I remember, I was like, hey man, like I feel kind of bad or weird, like really being into a mic because of how it looks. Right? Because it's more about how it sounds. And he's like, well, no, you shouldn't feel bad about that at all, because when you think about it, the person that designed the mic designed how it looks.
Yeah.
And that it all goes together, you know. You don't necessarily judge a book by its cover, but a good book usually has a good cover. I hope. I don't know if that's true. Don't quote me on that. But but it kind of like, you know, because he's so pragmatic, and I thought he's like, yeah, he was going to tell me like, yeah, it doesn't matter what it looks like. But then when he was like, yeah, of course it matters what they look like. And Russian mics are the coolest fucking looking mics. And then I did learn after, you know, over the years, you know, at first it was just like, oh, I put a mic up, how does it sound? But now, you know, I understand. I've gone deep, right? Like I know every tube, transformer, the type of capsule, why it sounds the way it does, how many microns thick, what's the polarization voltage, why is a power supply, regulated, unregulated, all these things that go into it, and then discovering that the design of these Russian mics, although it's inspired by a lot of the German classics, the Russians were definitely doing their own thing, and they look different and they sound different, and they're some of my favorite mics. I choose them despite having so many of the classics. We have a vintage C12, we have a M49B. They're great mics. We have KM86s, we have Sony C37As, and we can talk about Japanese mics too. And I use them, but I'm
really quick. When was it that you started accumulating all these mics? Like, when did you actually buy? What was the first mic that you spent a lot of money on? And you were just like, oh my God, like that's a lot of money. But I see that you have I can see the power supplies behind you, and we're talking, you can't even find those mics in one building, and here you are.
Can you zoom in on those
right
power
here?
supplies?
I mean, so tell me, like, how did you even go about that? Or was it because of Albini being hip to those certain mics that those are the first ones you went after, like Sony C37s, Lomos?
No, the order is different. So I remember my first time buying a professional mic. I was in my dorm room, and I got my first credit card. It was 98. It was a Discover card, and that Discover card fucked me up for life, actually.
Right.
I finally got over that problem. And I think it's this first SM57, if I think about it. I had a $100 limit, and I got a SM57. I thought, this is it, man. My life is going to change, because I'm recording on this shitty tiny board into like an Echo Layla. I don't know if you remember all these things, with my Event 2020 monitors and the SM57. Like, that's a real mic. And I was like, I can't believe I'm spending $100 on a mic, but I'm going to do it, man. I'm going to max out my $100 credit card to get. And then I didn't know what I was supposed to do, and I didn't pay that thing. So that SM57 ended up costing me like probably thousands of dollars. And a horrible credit score, and then it's we don't have to go into that. But I like the thought of that first SM57 really. But then after that, I got deeper and deeper, and I got really into the Russian mics. And so my first ribbon mic and my first Russian mic was probably the Octava MC012 that everyone knows, the Guitar Center Octava. And we can talk about that later, but that's a very different Octava. That's post-Soviet Octava. Very different than the vintage Octavas I'm going to show you, like this one. So this is the Octava ML19. It is a cardioid unidirectional ribbon microphone. This one's from 1983. So this was the last ribbon mic they made. So Octava ribbon mics, M stands for microphone, L stands for lenta, which means ribbon. So that's microphone, ribbon. And then the number 19, that's the 19th mic they designed. There's an ML20. It's a reporter mic, like that Coles reporter mic, the STZ something or other. Anyway, this was the first one I got. And I actually got it while I was interning at Electrical, and I brought them in because I saw Steve didn't have them. And I was like, look at these cool Russian ribbon mics. And he was stoked, and he was recording this band, Valina, this Austrian band they became pretty good buddies. And he used them for the overheads, and I was like, "Whoa, he's using my mics, for overheads." And he's like, "Yeah, these sound really good." And that was my first ribbon mic, my first Soviet mic, and I've learned a lot about them since then, which you and I have talked about. There's a lot of these mics can sound really good right off the bat. It's shocking how much better they can sound when you do a couple things to them.
As far as Cole picks, he's life-changing for us being into old mics. He's one of the few guys. He's a really young guy, too. He's not even like,
he's like
some 70-year-old dude. He's super young, and he really tackles some of the most difficult dynamic and ribbon mics to work on. And so our mutual friend Cole, without even us talking right now, I think I have 3 mics he's working on. So I'll send a link for Cole as well. So if you have some dynamics and some ribbons you need some work on, Cole is definitely your friend for sure.
I only put out one of each mic, but we have at least a pair of every mic. That's how obsessive and OCD I am. And I obsessively try and get the serials as close together as possible. Some of this is not pragmatic. Some of this is that I have a problem, but also it allows me. I went deep, man. I know everything about these mics. I love them. I use them. I obsess over them. What I forgot to say is a lot of these Russian mics are versions or inspired by some of the classics. And so the ML19 is basically the Soviet version of an RCA BK5.
Now, to share people of your obsession on this, tell us how many of those 19s do you have?
Oh, well, so that's not about the obsession. That's because I had the opportunity to acquire 45 new old stock
Oh my God.
ML19s
Oh my
from a
God,
buddy
dude.
in Belarus. So I have like over 20 years of collecting Russian mics. I know, and I speak Russian, which helps. So I know all these guys, and I've developed friendships with a lot of them. And especially my buddy Sergey in Belarus. He and I we're just buds, and he always is like, "Hey, look what I found.
Oh my God.
Would you be interested in those?" I was like, "Yeah," because I have the super special project I want to do with them. And if anyone is interested, it's going to be, there's nothing like it. It's going to be really eye-opening for any mic enthusiast, and to really see how important, even with a brand new ribbon mic, these were made cheaply. These guys, they sound fantastic, but the ribbon material is not great. It's very quickly and poorly installed. They made tons of these mics. But if you do a few simple things, because ribbon mics are simple. I mean, it's a transformer, magnet, and a ribbon, and a cable. Unless we'll get into some of the Japanese, they get a little crazier. But that's basically it. And in some cases, an acoustic chamber with a cardioid. So if you do a few things, you could do a lot. But what I want to say, so this is the Soviet version of the BK5. And I know you guys probably want to see some real rare stuff. We're never going to get through all 250 insane mics here, obviously. But this is one of the rarest Soviet ribbon mics, or ribbon mics, that I have. And this is an ML18.
Oh my God. Wow.
So the ML18, they made 20 of these.
Uh-huh.
And it is 2 ML19s in one mic to make it hyperdirectional. So almost like a shotgun mic. Now,
Wow.
the ML19 is a copy of the BK5, which everyone knows. The ML18 is a copy of the BK10, also known as the Perry Como mic. They only made 200 of them. You can look up BK10, and it is 2 BK5s in a row for picking up Perry Cuomo's voice on TV, because he sang so quietly. And it was hyper-directional boom mic. And so the Soviets literally took their copy of the BK5 and made a copy of the Perry Cuomo mic, which is one of the rarest RCAs, to make their version of the rarest. So this is one of my favorite mics to this day. Now, it gets a little confusing here because the one I'm going to show you is not the one I bought. So some people may have seen this. These are vintage Octavas. And some may be labeled IRPAs.
Those are beautiful.
Oh, yeah. Well, and it's like...
If it was called Noralco, you would think.
Yeah. So the one I got looked just like this. And this was before I knew anything about it. It was on eBay, probably $300. And it said MK13 tube mic. I didn't know any better, multi-pattern tube mic. And so I got it. And it was it was $800. And that was the most I'd ever spent on mic. It was crazy. This is 2001 or something.
Is that the like C12A copy version of that?
So that's what a lot of people say because of the shape of it, but it's actually a dual diaphragm M7 glue-on style capsule. So it's a multi-pattern M7 style capsule. So it's it does not follow the AKG family. It's more of a Neumann style mic. But this is the MK13M. The M is actually a T in Russian, and the T stands for transistor. So this is actually, the MK13M is actually a transistorized mic, and it uses germanium transistors, which give it... So the one I bought had been modified to be a tube mic. It had been modified to be this, which is the real MK13. So it's the long body version to accommodate the tube. But my first one was a modified MK13M. Since then, I learned this was supposed to be transistorized. This is a real transistorized version, and it's one of my favorite mics because the germanium transistors really saturate and compress. You know, people think, oh, tube mics like compress because of the tube. Tubes have a lot of, if they're not biased properly maybe, but most tubes have a lot of headroom. And a lot of the compression people associate with tubes is actually from an unregulated power supply, so that when the amplitude goes up, the power supply sags and the tube voltage goes down, and it's sort of a natural compression. But the tube itself has a lot of headroom. But these germanium transistors in here, they saturate and break up very subtly, sort of like how a distressor distorts. It doesn't really distort, it like saturates a bit. And you could put them on anything, and you don't have to use a compressor. Kick drum, vocal, mic, guitar. It's awesome. In this mic, it's not extreme, like it's really high fidelity. It's not like lo-fi. But even you look at the waveform, and it's like, oh, the transients are being chopped a bit, and it sounds great. It's like you don't have to do anything with it, and that's where mic selection comes in, right?
So if you're looking for those, do you see those around still? The ones that are transistors, not the tube?
Yeah, so I have restored, I have 7 restored ones. They require a lot of work. So the capsules are usually in bad shape. They oxidize pretty easily. The power supplies, a lot of the capacitors blow up in the supplies and the switches. And then, so you can find them, but I have yet to come across one that works perfectly. I have yet to come across a single vintage Rush Soviet mic, or maybe any mic.
Any mic, yeah.
Vintage, no matter what someone says, perfect service, whatever. At least to my standards, for it to be working exactly as it should. And this is my big thing. Like a lot of people out there, and if you're one of those professionals or whatever that's made a billion records and you say this stuff, I'm not trying to start an argument here, but a lot of people say, vintage original capsule, man, they all sound different. You got to find a good one. The reason the vintage mics are sounding different is because they're 60 or 70 years old. The mylar has stiffened. So much shit has happened to that mic. It's not sounding the way it should. I'm not saying it's wrong to love an old mic that sounds different because that's the sound you love. That's great. But a lot of people are like, oh, a reskin capsule, it's not the same. If a capsule is reskinned properly the way it should be, with the right thickness of diaphragm, the right diameter, everything's done properly, tensioned right, the backplate's tuned if needed, whatever, done exactly how it should be, it will sound exactly like your vintage U47 did the day it was made, So like, it won't sound the same as a 60-year-old U47 because it's not 60 years old. This is the 1989. It's probably the most recognizable Lomo mic. Steve famously sold the pair he used on In Utero for girls' overheads on Reverb to a collector. This is one of my favorite mics. It's a very simple mic. It has a single-sided M7 like glue-on large diaphragm. It uses a 6J1P tube. The power supply is critical to this mic, the original one, because it has the output transformer, a huge toroidal output transformer with a really unusually proprietarily high inductance. So you can't really find a replacement transformer, which is why the power supply is important. Anyway, I've had at least 20 of these 19A9s through the studio. And I've had ones that had original diaphragms that worked perfectly. Now we're talking, this mic is from 1963. So this mic is 60 years old. And I had four of them that were perfect. I set them up in an array so the diaphragms were as close together as possible. And I had my friends sing into all 4 of them. And then we listened back, and you could not tell the difference. Obviously, there's a difference acoustically, like they're not right. There's distance between each mic. You'd flip the polarity on one another and they would cancel like 90%. The mics sounded virtually identical. So like, and Neumann, to be honest, Neumann's like quality control and manufacturing specs were way tighter tolerances than the Russian stuff. So anyway, there's real mic experts that can say more to that. But in my experience in talking with a lot of, I work with John Peluso very closely. I don't trust anyone else with my Soviet mics. He's done hundreds of them. So along here to my right are all condensers, tube condensers. and solid state condensers, and they start from timeline with tube mics going all the way with all Soviet mics on the top, and then down here we've got AKG C12, Neumann M49B, and then it goes through the Neumanns, then through all the Sonys, and then through all the others. And then down the middle here are all the ribbon mics with all the Soviet mics, the Toshiba Japanese, the Iowa Japanese ribbons, the national Japanese ribbons, and then all the other nationalities. We got Coles and Tannoy from the UK, Melodium from France, and then RCA, and then the modern AA mics over here. We have very few modern mics, except for ones that I feel do something better than the vintage ones. And then here we have all the dynamics, all the Russian dynamics consecutive. So starting from, I guess those are 40s, all the Russian mics, then my Fostech printed ribbon mics, which I'm obsessed with, and I used quite a few on that Deerhoof record. Then my Japanese dynamic mics, and then all the classic dynamic mics, most of which are German, and then some American. Yeah, it's just the Germans and the Americans there. And so it's kind of fucked up because I know every single one of these mics very intimately. I'm totally a crazy person. So, so what I was going to say is that we have very few modern mics. And that's not like a snobby thing. It's just I'm interested in vintage mics, and but there's some that do things that some of the vintage mics can't. And so Peluso sent me these P414s, and they are meant to be a copy, a recreation. I wouldn't say an exact copy, a recreation of the original C414 EB with the brass capsule. This here is a C414 EB with a nylon capsule, but from the outside, they pretty much look the same. And this
I had one with a nylon and it sounded amazing. So
they sound amazing. They sound different.
You.
Yeah, but they sound amazing. They're a little brighter, more present, it seems. But you can look up, there's frequency response charts. They definitely have a different sound, but they're great mics too. Yep. And this is his P414, which is a brass capsule reissue. You probably can't see the brass capsule in there, but and so they're incredibly affordable, especially when you consider what a brass capsule 414 goes for. And no, Peluso is not paying me to say this. I'm just a fan of this mic. He sent it to us to try to demo out, and I was like, sure. And I put them on toms, and it was like everyone at the studio was blown away. It's like, that's the best tom mic we have. And then I go back, I was like, no. I've been using all these other mics for toms. Nope. The Peluso is like, it's like, wow, this is incredible. When I find something that works every single time, this mic,
use it.
And so he's gone over like there are some improvements, like it's got better self noise, it's got more headroom than the vintage one. The polar patterns are in a different order, I think. I don't know why. Yeah. But it's really sturdy. It has been hit. I'm not precious about that stuff.
Yeah.
And it works every time. And that's honestly what you need, right? I just got this one back from John, and it's a big one for me, so I'll bring it out first. And if Sylvia's watching, she's going to be stoked to see it. So this looks like a C37A.
Yeah.
But it is a CU1. And it's not made by Sony, technically.
Uh-huh.
It's made by Tsushin Kogyo. I don't know if Will can get that close.
Oh my God, man. Was that listed as a Sony C37, or was it just listed as that brand?
It's Tsushin Kogyo. So the history is that Tsushin Kogyo is the name of Sony I think it's 59, and then they just changed it to Sony. But this is serial number 12.
Oh my God.
And I'm not going to open it up now. I open it up, I got it. It has the same very simple cathode follower circuit with a 6AU6 tube inside. Same, but the capsule's different. It's pre-Mylar. It's pre-polyester, I think. And it had a 58 micron thick copper diaphragm, which means it's one of the earliest condenser mics. It's obviously a precursor. I'll just show you the classic C37A for reference. You can tell that they are obviously related very, 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 very closely. Sorry if I'm too close.
Those are so beautiful.
Yep. So Peluso actually found 48 microns, to people that don't know, 48 microns is very thick. I believe, and I always forget, but I believe most modern capsules are like 5 to 8 microns thick. And so 48 microns is incredibly thick. And he tried a thinner diaphragm, but it would get sucked into the backplate. So the way the mic is designed, it requires a thick.
Because there's so much voltage pulling on that,
So it sucks it in.
You can shoot a hole right through your capsule.
Don't get addicted to mics out there. But if you do see one of these, you should grab one, because this is serial number 3. So there's at least 2 more in the world that have existed since the year 1961 in Soviet Russia. So I doubt there's another one. It's sort of a Lomo. We won't go into the complicated history of Russian mics, Soviet mics. Let's just say that Soviet Russia is not a capitalist society. Obviously, it's communist. They didn't make stuff for resale, really, or export. They made stuff for the people, which was really cheaply, poorly made. And then they made stuff for governmental use, for cinema, which was their most coveted art form, as Lenin famously said, and orchestra recordings, opera, and speeches, obviously. And for that stuff, they made one-of-a-kind, sometimes 5-of-a-kind mics for the Kremlin, or for like governmental use, or for whatever their main orchestra hall was. And so that's what this is. So Lomo is a factory, not a brand. That's what people have to understand. Octava became a brand in the 90s when communism fell. But before that, it was the Octava factory. So the reason all these old Octava mics are ribbons is because the Octava factory was responsible for making dynamics and ribbons. The Lomo factory was responsible for making condenser and tube mics. But this is it's not that it's pre-Lomo, was made by hand by the research department. This is Len Kinap. So that's Lenin's Kinap, which is cinema, whatever. So this is Lenin's special, like really small research department that designed mics for cinema. And this is one of 3, and it's a precursor to the Lomo 19A14, but it's called the KMD2. KMD are the initials of the engineer that designed the mic, and I forget his name. And so the Lomo 19A9 that we looked at before was originally called the Len Kinap KMD1, and this is the KMD2. Now, here's the fucked up thing about this mic. This is a tube mic. Look at how small it is. It's like the size of the capsule. If you were to open it up, you'd see a sub-miniature tube behind the capsule, 1 capacitor and the capsule, and then like the 19A9, the power supply houses the output transformer and everything else. So they basically designed like possibly the smallest. I'll show you the 19A14 that the Lomo factory made based on it. So this is the 19A14. And it's basically a 19A9 with a different tube. It uses a 631B, and the capsule is similar, but it has a resonant dead like back diaphragm, whereas the 19A9 has no diaphragm on the back. It's just one-sided. So these are all things that make slight differences in the sound of the mic. These mics have a little more high-end and less proximity effect. And the Lomo 19A9 is a little richer, like a U47, and has more proximity effect and is a little what you would call warmer sounding, for lack of a better term.
So when are we going to get the Russian recording handbook on microphones? And you're going to put all this down in paper so we can walk around and carry it with us,
We want to have a mic menu that, like electrical sight's very useful. Like I used to reference it all the time. Like this sounds like this. Well, I can tell you now, like exactly what mics are designed to be like. And this mic menu would have a photo of the mic, have the history of the mic. Not just that it sounds like, but it is quite literally a copy. And in a lot of cases here, and this is the big thing that we should talk about, is especially with the Japanese mics, we all know the Japanese, they're meticulous. And
Yeah.
they will take an idea and they will improve it. They will make it better. All our cars are Japanese cars because they do it better, man. And so all these Japanese ribbon mics that are influenced, in some cases, almost identical copies.
Yeah.
You can even ask Cole, he's like, man, this Japanese RCA 44A copy sounds better than the RCA. I'm like, I know. This is a good transition for me to talk about like Russian, Japanese, whatever versions of the classic mics, whether it's a ribbon, especially with the ribbons, I think is the most stunning comparison, like shockingly, like, whoa, that's obviously a Japanese version of a BK5. But why don't you can shoot, I thought it might be fun if you say like a classic mic and then I'll find you.
Well, we were talking about initially about the RCA Junior, which is a smaller version of like a 44. And I think people always associate them as they're kind of right there in the middle where they're expensive, but not that much. You can still go out and grab them. But I've grown to love these, and I think there's a lot of people out there that could be hip to those. Do you have a version of a Junior or somewhere like that?
Sort of. Yeah, so the Toshiba's here. I'd say I think the closest is a Toshiba C type, and I don't have one. Cole sold one that he got for me a while ago on Cole Picks, but this is the Toshiba Type F, and it looks like an RCA 44 Junior, but actually this one's quite different, and it's pretty amazing. This is the closest thing I have now to an F type, but the Toshiba C is smaller than a Junior. It's like really small. Sounds incredible. You can find them really cheap on Japanese auction sites sometimes. The trouble with them is they have solder-on ribbons, but Cole's mastered those, and he's fixed a couple C's for me.
Now, really quick, with that long ribbon, did you notice any difference in the sound compared because it had a really long ribbon in it?
Well, yeah, but here's the thing: is because it's so long, they have these like welded bars.
Oh yeah, they go across the middle of it.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it didn't sound great. And I was like, I think those are there because the ribbon's so long to Cole, because John recreated that. And I was like, I'd like to hear it with the full ribbon intact. Do you think that's possible? I'll keep it vertical, because a long ribbon can sag. And Cole did it, and it's unbelievable how much better this mic sounds. Like huge low end. I love it on guitars. It's got this really cool mechanical knob that opens and closes a sort of like a baffle that closes the back of the ribbon. So basically all the way open is figure 8, but when you close it, it becomes a pressure gradient omnidirectional mic.
I love that.
It's cool, but pressure, I don't know if you ever put like a RCA 77 in Omni. It's omnidirectional, but it sounds like garbage. It's like really thin, but that's what a pressure gradient Omni sounds like. Yeah. Well, that's a good transition to the most famous multi-pattern ribbon mic of all time, right? The RCA 77D. So this is like obviously a very famous mic. Of all the RCAs, I think the D is my favorite. I've had some DXs. I didn't like the sound of the DX so much. The D I really love. It's got a really useful sound. It actually surprisingly sounds good in all the patterns, I think. Cardioid, figure 8, and all the in-betweens. And then, so I've loved this D quite a bit. And I was like, that might be one RCA I won't find a Japanese one that will replace it. And then I scored this killer NHK version of an Iowa VM17. Oh, it's so cool. And on this one, I don't know if you can see, but so the Japanese make everything cooler. So instead of that clunky thing that you turn, you can't even see the arrow on the RCA, like which way is it pointing? It says you turn this way for bidirectional and this way for non-directional and anywhere in between. And here, there's a little meter, like a mechanical meter. As you turn it, it goes up and shows you how far along you are on the polar pattern spectrum.
Oh, shoot. That's so rad.
And inside, there's like a little like gate that opens and closes the chamber. It's the engineering is just brilliant. The other thing the Japanese do, which is totally insane, on every single ribbon mic, I don't know if you can see it, but there is a 5-position high-pass filter.
Well, that's funny that you say that because people don't know it. When people, and this was Cole had mentioned this, like when people get like let's say an RCA Junior and you want to replace it, you're like, oh, I'll put a Cinemag in it, but they don't understand that those old transformers, they would cut some of the low end because all ribbons have a lot of low end and rumble.
Exactly.
But if you put a Cinemag in it, you basically put it on tilt on low end, and suddenly it becomes unusable because it's so
Boomy.
deep. Yeah, it's so boomy, and then you don't like it. But the old transformers, a lot of them were made, and like that one has the adjustment.
This one has the adjustment, and there's some Russian mics that people like get them. They're like, oh, this thing sounds terrible. A lot of Russian mics, they actually build in like a choke filter, bandpass filter. The ML11M's famous for that. It sounds terrible. It's like bandpass, but it's because it was made for public announce. It's a cardioid mic with a choke filter so that it doesn't feed back and you just hear the voice. So you pull that choke filter out, and like boom, the thing sounds like amazing. Like literally, it goes from dog shit to like cheesecake. So I just want to show you this. So I showed you an old Iowa VM17. This is an Iowa VM17 SA. This was their flagship ribbon mic. But here's the thing. RCA stopped making ribbon mics. Everyone stopped making ribbon mics, and Iowa kept making them. They already improved them in the 60s, and they kept going. And so this thing is from 1986, I think. And it is the next step, and it's like NASA grade build quality.
What's the model of that one? What's the model number?
It's the VM17 SA. And they're really rare. They've got a kind of an 80s look to them. But I did a post on, by the way, my Instagram for mic stuff is Soviet American Audio Systems on Instagram. And I haven't posted in a year just because basically the pandemic ended and I have been doing sessions ever since. But I have a plan to keep it going. Basically, it's me posting about all this stuff and taking photos. But I do have a post on this mic, and the internals are like amazing. But the polar pattern is switched with this thumb wheel. And when you look inside, it's like a fucking greased, like stainless steel, like micro machined chamber. It's like, it's insane. It's got to be like, so we have 2 of these that are like a few serial numbers apart, and they sound 100% identical, which, as you know, as a ribbon guy, that's like a pretty big challenge to get 2 ribbons.
I mean, people make a misconception. They get ribbons and they say they're other match pair. It's really different. Maybe Royer can get close to them because Royer actually weighs the ribbon. They don't do it by, so if you weigh the ribbons and they match your transformers down to the wire, you can get a closer match pair. But in the ribbon world, especially when we've got mics that have been re-ribboned, done by other people, and also some ribbons have been shot out, even if you get a pair, it's really difficult to get them both unless Cole does them at the same time, and then you have a better chance of that happening.
That's what I do with Cole. Yeah, he does match them as close as possible for us. So this is the mic you were talking about.
Yeah, that's it.
This thing's brutally rare. So it's so like I said, the Soviet mics, this is ML11B. So ML is microphone ribbon mic. 11 is like the design. So this is the ML11B. There's also an ML11, which I don't own one, and I really desperately want one.
What company? Is it Octava or?
So remember, there's no companies. There's just factories and departments. Factories and departments. So this department is MRTP. So if you find a Soviet mic that's MRTP, IRPA, KINAP, those are all of like the bureaus of design and manufacturing. Those are like the highest end. The transformer in this mic is like this big. It's way overbuilt. They maybe made 30 of them. No, it looks like 100. This one's serial number 94. It's from 1956. So this is a Soviet version of a 77, but in cardioid only mode. It doesn't have a polar pattern switch, but it does have the chamber in the back with the tube that goes down through it. And Peluso worked on this, and this mic, you heard it on that, is so bright. It sounds like a condenser. And I don't know if you've ever seen or heard RCA 77A. Huge, they're crazy. My buddy at No Fun Club, the studio I designed in Canada, he's got a 77A. They're like this big, man.
Wow.
They look, it's so if you look at the Deerhoof video.
No, I know which one you're talking about. I actually had one of those. A buddy of mine had one. It was massive. It looks like a
rocket.
It's like a football, bigger than a football.
Bigger
it's like
than
so
football.
Massive. Yeah.
Yeah. So in that Deerhoof, the video I did of recording Satomi, we used a 77A with a C37A. Anyway, yeah, that's the mic I was using on that video I posted. And the original transformer, here's another thing. Everyone's like, oh, big old transformers, man, they're better. Not always, or it depends what you're going for, but the mic was really bright with that transformer, too bright. Peluso put in his transformer. I kept the original in there. It's just a matter of resoldering the wires. When it came back with his ribbon transformer, which I like quite a lot, it's a big secret that people might not know about. His transformers sound good, his ribbon mic transformers. The mic came to life, man. Like, shocking. The low end was even, not overwhelming, and it really balanced it out. So that's the mic that you were talking about there. Oh, and here's an example. This is the Octava factory made the ML11, which is the same, but this is the ML11M. And this one is pretty rare. It's not nearly as rare as that, but this is the one that has the choke built into it. So I kept getting this. I got like my hands on my first one. I'm like, this sounds like dog shit. I got ripped off, and then the ribbon looks good, and I sent it off, or I opened it up and I saw, what's all this? There's like a capacitor and it's extra transformer. What is this? And then learned that it's a choke that they built in. Remove that, and suddenly you got a full range microphone again. Yeah, these are great. I've used these for overheads quite a bit too.
Man, your knowledge of all that stuff is just pretty deep, man. You should be like 70 years old.
Yeah.
That's why we need that. That's why we need your Russian handbook, man. I'm telling you, it'd be in my studio for sure.
It'd be cool. Yeah, it's ADHD, man. You gotta constantly be these guys here, and it's like I want to share this stuff because people should know about it. But you know how people are on the internet. Oh, don't ruin the secret. Fuck that, man. Plus, it's hard to find these things, anyways. But this is one of the coolest discoveries, and my buddy Luke Glickman kind of turned me on to him because we were both obsessed with the Japanese marketplace. You can find a lot of cool stuff there. This is an Iowa DM68A, and does it remind you of anything yet?
Of course, the 19.
Yep. And
it would be the AKG D19, which is famously known as the Ringo Starr's overhead.
Yes, yeah. And did you get yours?
We were talking. No, I got two of them, which are D119s, and they're somewhat. They look a little bit like that one, but those were
right.
AKG. These would be made in Japan.
Yes, and so they're really well made. And notoriously the D19s capsules go bad. They're super unreliable. They look cooler than this, that's for sure. This mic is a studio favorite with every engineer, visiting producer. It's like the number one piano mic, guitar amp mic. This mic sounds totally fucking awesome. If you look at the frequency response chart, and that's what Luke showed me. He's like, dude, look, that looks like a D19. Look at the frequency response charts. They are like identical. Like, obviously there's more to a sound of a mic than it's just its frequency response. There's the phase, there's proximity effect, there's all kinds of stuff.
People don't understand all those little vents on the side have a lot to do with the sound.
If you cover that, it's going to sound different. So like if you're using this mic, have the vents facing out, because you cover the vents, then it's going to fuck up the directionality. And the important thing is to get first of all, you have to get, this is the 250 ohm version. All Japanese mics that I've talked about, by the way, it has to be the low impedance version. That's the professional version. 250 ohm, 600 ohm. If it's 10K or any high impedance version, that is a mic meant to be plugged into a guitar amp or into it's like, and they may look exactly the same, but they have different transformers. They're way more cheaply made. They're cheaper. I'm so obsessive. I have these Japanese catalogs of all these mics, Iowa, Sony, everyone, and I translate them all, and I go through and I go see what the specs are and why this and what they sold for and what year, and then I go through and do the calculation for inflation and exchange rates.
You've got a problem.
Yeah, ask my wife and my kids and Will, who's behind the camera.
Oh shoot!
But that's okay. You only live once, supposedly, so might as well get as much info as you can. But yeah, so look out. The DM68A has an XLR, 3-pin XLR, and it's the good one. There is a DM68 without any letter after it, which uses some weird 3-pin Japanese connector, also good. The DM68 something else with a high impedance.
Yep.
Again, it's like the difference between rotten eggs and homemade cupcakes. I'm new to this mic, and it's a classic, but it's the this is actually the BF 509.
Oh shoot!
Do you know anything about this? Yeah.
Well, I have.
It's a 409.
I have a 409. I just got a 409.
This is a 409, and if you don't know the story, you know Mateus from Infernal Machine, the French guy. I got these from him. He's very knowledgeable about this stuff too. Basically, Sennheiser had some kind of a contract where they weren't allowed to sell mics in big box stores like Guitar Center, but the 409 was so popular, so they just changed the color and called it a Blackfire 509, and then sold it. So
Wow.
this is exactly a 409. It just looks different. The Sony C37P, which has recently skyrocketed in value. It's basically the solid state version of the C37A. Same capsule. Sony mic, condenser mics, with a few exceptions, have a very neutral, mellow sound, which is what I really love about them. They don't have that presence peak or extended low end. It's like very flat. And this is a nice sort of rounder sounding mic with clarity. That's great on guitar amps. This is maybe one of my rarest mics. Another one has never been seen or found.
Oh shoot, that looks amazing.
It is. It's huge. This thing, this cable, donut thing that's attached to the cable is the output transformer. It has these huge cylindrical magnets you can't see, huge like cylinders, and then this long ass ribbon. It's really weirdly thin. It's a Kinap, so it's a Soviet mic. It has no model number. And when I got it, it was in like new condition in the original box, probably from the 40s or 50s.
You son of a gun, you. And where do you use that one on the drum kit?
So this was my go-to outside. I love large ribbon mics for outside kick. A lot of people freak out about it. They're like, what? It's going to blow the ribbon. If you're careful, I put 3 pop filters in front of it, and I make sure it's not in front of the hole. It's the wind blast that busts the ribbon. Otherwise, it can handle a kick drum for a while. You'll have to replace the ribbon, but you got to do that anyway.
People don't realize I even put a pop filter in front of I had a dynamic. I had a Bayer
M88.
No, it was a TJ X50.
Yep.
And it used to pop a little bit, and I would put that. Or sometimes M88s are known for being low endy, but you can start to buckle those. And I'll put a pop filter in front of them, and it really does help. Even in front of a guitar.
M88, I've had 2 M88s blow out on a kick drum entirely as dynamics, so definitely useful. So anyway, that would be another popular. Now for my inside kick mic, and I'll go ahead and bring out my new favorite snare mic. Sorry, I'm talking loud because I'm walking away from the camera, but I realize I'm wearing a lav. So then it seems like I'm yelling for no reason, and that's explaining why I'm doing that. Here are my new favorite dynamic mics, Manny, and you can find these cheap.
All right.
Yamaha MZ204.
Dude, I saw those on your last posting, and I was like, what the hell is that guy using Yamahas? What's going on?
They're awesome. They look lame, although they're Japanese, so they're so well machined. Look at this, like machine, and then the XLR on the sides, genius for inside a kick drum. This thing turns. You can really position it really well. So here's the trick with these Yamaha MZ mics. They came out with them. They kind of flopped in the 90s. This is the kick drum mic. And they had two versions. This is just the MZ204. Now this is the snare mic. It's MZ105, but this one's a BE. The BE means it uses a beryllium diaphragm.
All right.
Which they're the only ones to do it, which I guess is lighter and
how do you
stronger.
know this? How did you figure this out?
I just read about it. I
saw read
the
about
thing.
It and interpreted it from Japanese to English?
No. These were exported to the States.
Okay.
Yeah, you can read about them. There's like there's this one post about a guy's like, hey, people make fun of these. This was my first mic I bought in Guitar Center in '92. It was really expensive. I thought I want to get this fancy mic, and then no one bought them, but I've been using it ever since for like live sound, I think. But this has been my snare mic and then my inside kick mic for the past few months. Another one, my favorite ribbon mics of all time. If you get one ribbon mic, they're so hard to find, but these mics are awesome. This is like the final mic they made. It's the VM20A. This tiny little guy. It sounds heroic, man. Like the fidelity is unreal. Anyway, that's what I used. So you place it like this and point it at the shell. And so it's like equidistant from the snare, rack tom, floor tom, and then kick drum below it. But then you usually have this asshole ride.
Yeah.
And then the asshole drummer who's playing it
wants it so close, and you gotta move.
Well, no, and then they crash on the ride. That's great. I'm always like, hey, I love how it's your choice how you want to drum. I'm totally into it, but that's gonna sound. It's really hard to record that. But it's my job. It's our job as engineers to like let the drummer play the way they want to play and the thing they wrote. That's their thing. It's our job to like deal with it. So I like to pick a figure 8 in that position, and then I position it so that the null is facing that ride.
On the side, yeah.
It's amazing how useful the null on a figure 8 is, and what a troubleshooting design that is. It literally removes the fucking ride from the mic. So that's what I do there. Yeah, and I usually, that's like the one mic. I don't typically squash things on the way in, but I like to put a nice snappy, pumpy compressor on this one, and then I usually blend it in. If I have like wide overheads, it ties in the center so that they don't sound, that pss, pss, pss sound. It fills in the center and really ties the kit together. And usually like the tone of the snare is found in that. Go-to bottom snare is another great mic that people should know about. Well, if you're familiar with Alan Sides of Ocean Way,
yeah.
He famously claimed that this is the best mic ever made, and had something like 35 of them at Ocean Way.
Oh my God!
And it's a Sony C55. And I remember seeing Steve somewhere, and he was like, "Oh, I just came back from the session at whatever the studio with all the C55s," which I think is so funny. It's like I didn't know then, but I was like, "Oh, he was talking about Ocean Way. Why didn't he just say Ocean Way?
Ocean Way.
Pretty famous studio, Steve." But
did he like them? Did he use them?
Oh yeah, he said he used them everywhere. They're awesome. But so it's a medium diaphragm condenser mic from the 70s. I don't know, Will, if you can see this, but can you see that little arrow? So this is the C55P. There's also an AC I'll talk about. So when the arrow's pointing this way, the capsule's pointing this way, and it's end address. Then you just take your fingers and you turn it, and now the arrow's pointing this way.
Dude, that is
insane. The capsule's pointing this way, and now
that's a tone mic or whatever you want. Oh my God! What are you using that on? Oh, that's the bottom.
You can also go You can also go halfway. So you can position your mic, and instead of having to fuck with everything, you just turn this capsule and point exactly where you want it. So this has been my favorite bottom mic. It's one of the few like brighter, sparklier Sony mics, and it's great to pick up the sizzle.
Do you use it anywhere else, or have you used those anywhere else?
Oh yeah, I've used them as overheads. They're very clear. They're really, this is a workhorse mic. You can put it on a vocal, on anything. And I think that's why Alan Sides said, he seems like a pragmatist. He says, hey, you know what? We need a bunch of these because they literally work in every situation.
Yeah.
So I love the Coke bottles on the floor, Albini style. I do that a lot. One thing that a lot of people don't know about is the difference between the 21B and 21D capsule, and I'd love to help people understand the difference, because there's a difference. So the 21, this is a 21D. here on this totally insane thing that finally, it was on Reverb forever and the dude finally dropped the price. And if you're watching, dude, thanks, I'm stoked. This is a really rare like desk mount or wall mount version of the 21D. He was asking like a couple $1,000. I was like, dude, it's a piece of metal with a tube in it, a cheap tube. Finally, it got down to like $200 or $300. I was like, I'll take it. And sure enough, it works perfectly, but I want to mount it to our wall as a permanent room mic, that's permanently wired. It didn't. Those are hard to come by, as you know. But anyway, so the 21B, I don't know, Will, if you can see that. So this is a 21B capsule. You'll see it has little slits along the side. And then on the front, it's flat. So the sound enters the side of the mic and passes across the top of the capsule.
Okay.
The reason the B has the slits on the side, it's designed to be a vocal mic. There's an ad that shows an opera singer singing into it. A vocal mic that is so low profile that it doesn't get in the way of the face, and then you sing into the side of it so it's not in front of your face. The 21D, I don't know if you can see this. They're all this is still Omni. So they're both Omni. Yeah. That's the other thing. Some people think that the D is cardioid, which it's not. It's slightly more directional on high frequencies, but not enough to matter. So this has holes cut in the front. On the side, there is no slit. This mic sounds, for general recording, room mics, overheads, maybe the most beautiful sounding mic I've ever heard with a 21D. 21B, use it for room mics. It has weird phase issues in the upper frequencies. It's a little harsh. They sound dramatically different. They're intended for two different purposes. So I actually like the Bs for room mics because the high end goes down a bit. But for like acoustic guitar and overheads, like in a dead room, the 21D is some of my best sounding drums in acoustic recordings. I have this one song I recorded for this band, Bullet Points. I just used one 21D. He sang and played acoustic guitar live in the dead room, and I just placed one mic and caught the whole thing. And it's one of the best like live acoustic guitar sounds I've gotten.
Well, thanks for sticking around for Manny's Mic Locker. Last segment will be the breakdown of our Link Wray song. If you're not familiar with Link Wray or Rumble, or even that song sounds familiar, it's basically a classic that's been, I wouldn't know if I would consider it underground because most guitar players, at least legendary ones, even like Jimmy Page, Link Wray influenced him, at least listening to his music. I decided to go with a vibe off his 70s live performance. He was playing with a fuzz pedal, looked like a total stud out there. His bass player and drummer looked like they just did a line and they were like, we're gonna do it tonight. Also, the cool thing about Link Wray, he's American Indian. And if you think about all the people that have been influential, having him being an American Indian makes it even sweeter for me, as I have American Indian in myself as well. But up until recent, that song has always been a toe tapper. You could just sing along with it. It's so simple. And when we played this song, it was so hard to restrain yourself and play it with the power that he had in it. So our version only holds true to kind of his 70s version of it. And I definitely went outside the line with some other pedals. My guitar sound and my guitar breakdown in the Chavez Ravine, which this is the Chavez Ravine, my band playing it, are three-piece. And my guitar setup since 1996, 97, when I first recorded with Steve Albini, was a small little solid state bass amp. It's like 10 watts. It's called the Jordan. There is nothing special about this amp except when I plug my guitar into it and I put some pedals in it, holy smokes, does stuff go on. Even when I flew to Chicago and I took it out of my suitcase, Steve was like, what's that? I'm like, I know, just let me plug it in and put a mic on it. So I've been using it, and every time I go to record, it just always gets me there where I need it to go. My guitar effects pedals, I'm sure, were nothing like what he had used. The main drive of that sound is an 80s rap pedal, two Earthquaker pedals called, one is called a Tentacle, the other one a Data Corruptor. Then also you'll see me stomp on one, and that is by Death by Audio. That's called a robot pedal, which it makes your guitar sound like a robot. So you hear this like almost like a flexing of the sound. It's me stomping on between two and three of them at a time, or I only use one. And it really is just, I mean, I really do use them. It looks like I'm just stepping on them like whenever I want to. I am actually trying to get certain things out of them. You'll see me go to this device that's a box and I'm slamming it around. That is called an EP3 Echoplex. That is a tape delay. It has a tape cartridge inside, famously known for Jimmy Page, Eddie Van Halen. That's an EP3. An EP1 or 2 would have been like Eric Johnson, Billy Gibbons. That is some of that psychedelic sound. So you could kind of say I'm doing a psychedelic version of Link Wray. Beyond that, my guitar, it's a strange guitar. It was something I found in a music store that someone had carved a Paul Reed Smith in the headstock. But when I played it, it was, oh my God, what is this guitar? So I had taken the guitar to a custom shop called Old Style in the city of Los Angeles in Silver Lake. And a weird request, I asked them to move the bridge as far back as you can to get the longest throw because I down tuned. And then I know I looked at the headstock and I'm like, it was about that big. And I said, listen, can you extend that to about that big? I don't care, add a piece of wood on it. You cut it the way you want it. And he did. So the guitar has a strange throw, strange sound. And it has, I think, 70s Gibson SG pickups in it. The reason we're even here from Manny's Mic Locker was to showcase some of the mics that I used on that show. Or on that track, I'm sorry. The kick drum had two mics in it from the same company, Dr. Alien. Probably one of the fastest growing, like wildfire, the word got out about this microphone that was sounding as cool or as better, or at least similar to a very rare dynamic called a Beyer 380, which is super hard to find, and most of them are busted. But this guy in Australia made this mic that is basically a large microphone with two sets of capsules. They're both figure eight. One faces forward, one goes back. The bottom one, reverse, and polarity the opposite. And it really has this incredible sound that's figure eight. And the original Beyer 380 was figure eight. So that was my first interest about getting Dr. Alien. And I was blown away that he sent a new mic called a Capsulate, which is half that version. So I try to utilize it as much as I can during the session. I use the Alien 8, which is the large double figure eight capsule on the front of the kick. And I'll show you that, what it sounds like. And then on the beater, I just literally hung over and taped the Capsulate, not the Alien 8. And that one is just half of it. On the snare, I was totally blown away by Mike, the producer that we had featured earlier. He had some videos, and he had a Peluso 414, P414 up on his snare. And I used to have an EB, and I was like, oh my God, I would love to check that out. So Peluso, thank you. They sent me one out. I put that on the snare, kind of in the flavor of the way Mike had used it on his, and it did not disappoint. I didn't get to use it on anywhere else except the snare on the drums. Obviously, I only have one. But I did bring it back and put it on my guitar, which I'll get to in a second. The last mic of that series were the Toms. Lawton, I've had them for, I think maybe about a half a year. I've been using these Lawton 308s. So I thought it was, once again, if I'm doing Manny's Mic Locker, I don't necessarily want to show you a mic that's cool or looks great. I mean, these are mics that I love and that I use. And the 308s have just been, they've been doing it for me. Outside of Manny's Mic Locker, if you look up Cardboard Sessions, there's a whole session there where those mics are definitely featured and really rocking. But on this one, on Manny's Mic Locker, I used them on the toms. Had one on the rack tom, one on the floor. They're condensers, and they have these brass capsules that look like they're about an inch apart. So there's something with the cancellation. Some of my favorite mics have two elements in them, and they just happen to use the same kind of technology for canceling out cymbals or other noise. And they really sound musical. And for me, at least my style of music that I'm recording, which is always weird stuff, it always makes the benchmark of excellence. And then from Manny's Mic Locker #1, if you had checked it out, I definitely brought back some other mics because I can. So I have a Mojave MA37, which I love, and I cannot not use it. That's on the rooms, on the floor. And then I have out in the front, which I didn't get to use on the first Manny's Mic Locker, and I'll show you here. I have the Vanguard, the 44, which is their tall microphone with 2 capsules that pivot. I wanted to use it with MS out in front of the drums, and I didn't get to use it in 1, but now here we are in #2, and I'm using the Vanguard large stereo microphone with 2 capsules that move around. One of my new favorites is the MyLab, and I look up like I'm going to see it right here. But the MyLab VIP 60 goes back to like Michael Jackson, Quincy Jones era. It's an incredible microphone. I use that on the overhead coming above the drums. I wanted a lot of detail of the drums because it's mostly ride, crashing, and bashing. I didn't want a tube mic to be distorting or even a dynamic that has to move a sound pressure to make it work. So the condenser is really nice to put up there for just detail. It's a basher, so I didn't mind the kind of clear image, and that's why I used the MyLab VIP 60. Didn't need the hi-hat because he didn't rock the hi-hat. On the ride, from also episode 1, I used my Old Faithful 60s AKG, a D224E, which is one of my favorite microphones, period. But it's a vintage mic. But once again, this is Manny's Mic Locker. I make the rules, and I'm saying I'm going to use all these mics. So hopefully as we progress through other episodes, if I still have these mics in my possession, I will use them and try to use them at different places. And maybe Mic Locker 3 or 4, I'm planning on using the Mojave on a bass rig and a guitar rig. So we're going to move them around and use them. So anyways, this is Link Wray. We tracked it live. And even in the video, when you see it, that's me playing it live on the spot. And that was important to me that I could do the dance, hit the pedal, do the Echoplex, play it live. And I recorded it myself on camera. So it just had the smoke. So this performance is live. Phil, the drummer, is live. Mondo is live. So this is us. The Chavez Ravine is my band. I hope you enjoy it. So one thing about my style of recording, which I know if you've seen anything I've done, I'm kind of like a caveman here. I just go for the bare bones. Like, let's make some sticks together, grind them up, make a fire. Come on. Like, it's really minimal style of recording. I believe in the microphones, which is why I have Manny's Mic Locker. I believe in the preamps, which everything I used here were Avitas and BAE. Love the idea. If you look at my Pro Tools, there is nothing all the way across. I have some time delays happening, which I do because my room is small, and I do a little trickery of just adding a little bit more reflection or adding distance. And then as you get into the other instruments, yeah, you'll see some plugins, but not a lot. But technically, I believe in when I do a drum set, it's not really gated. I very rarely, if ever, do not use samples. So I really have to strive to a great drummer, a great drum set. So that being said, when you hear the drums, they are very raw, but the dance is for me to blend all those microphones into making a drum set. So take it from the top again. So now we've just covered our snare and the kick drums, and let's go to the 308s on the toms. That's the 2 kicks, the snare, and the 2 toms. Now, because he was using the ride, that's why I used my vintage mic on the ride to cover that. So here's that mic after the toms. So this is just the spot mic, which I love this mic. This gets the job done. And that kind of dark sound It's just what it does. It's never gonna eclipse or just get into that hiss. It's just accurate, and that's why I use the 60s on the ride. So let's add the kicks and the snare and the toms. I've added the ride. I'm gonna add the overhead. This is the MyLab VIP 60, which is just true and accurate. It's got a rectangular capsule, super stealthy mic, maybe one of my favorites. Just getting the job done. Add the kick drum with it. I mean, you can almost get away with just those two. Let's add in the snare and the toms. I've added in the overhead, and then now the room was the Mojave, which I use it in a strange way. I put it on the floor. I put it on a piece of plywood because my room is really dead. And I do believe as a producer engineer, sometimes if you're not dealt with that Sound City or Dave Grohl studio, you have to make the best of what you have and just don't complain about it, just make it work. So the way I make my drum room work is I put down a plywood, it's like 2x4 maybe, and I set the mics on top of that, and I put them on the floor where it's not touching the floor, but it's kind of on the floor, slightly tilted down, and I have two of them usually. One's looking kind of on the outside of the kick towards the snare, and the one's on the other side. I did want to limit it down to how many mics I was going to use on this. I only used one Mojave. So my trick that I do is I duplicate that track with everything on it, and I make two of them, and then I delay them different. So out in the room, the what I put as the right side, this is the delay setting. If I go to the left side, you just saw it move a little bit. So I have two times happening. So these are the rooms by themselves. This is a Mojave MA37 tube condenser. Whew, these are smokingly cool, dark tube mics, and I love them for drums. So here's the drums just with those mics, slightly offset with delay. So I'm going to add the kick with it. It's off. I'm off. I mean, it's a party. Everybody's showing up. Take the rooms out, add them. All right, so that's kind of the basic drums. We ran the garden of all the mics, and now we're left with the Vanguard MS microphone. Once again, I love this mic. It's really flat. It's really not that expensive. I think it's about $1,000. Do yourself a favor. If you want a stereo mic, and they're really super flexible sonically, they're made excellent. So I'm going to play you just the drums. And this mic is broken down with a capsule that can go forward. Actually, you can turn them both so they're forward. But if you use them MS, you have one forward on the bottom, and then the top, you move it sideways so it's hitting figure eight this way. So you have one forward, and then the other capsule shooting out figure eight. So that's the way I have them. And because they have an MX box that breaks out in the middle, that sends it out that you can do MS, it's really important that before you listen to your drums in MS, in your DAW, this is a trick on how you know if you really are recording in MS. So I'm going to play the drums. I'm going to first play the bottom capsule, what it sounded like. So this is the bottom. super flat. I mean, it's right in front of the drums, and the cymbals are not blasting it. Now I'm going to add the MS. So that's all the whistle and bells of everything I did. So what I want to show you regarding the MS is they have a box that comes with it that has one capsule on the bottom that comes out straight at you. And then it has another one that's in phase, and then the top capsule. So one comes out in phase, and then they have a duplicate of it coming out of phase. And that's the starting process of your MS. So MS is one mic that you don't have to use one mic, you can use two. Like let's say you have a 414 and you face it forward to the drums. You can get another 414 and put it on the top and put it on figure 8. That is an MS, but you'll have to still break it out into 3 different channels. And what you'd do is you'd have this forward one going just one channel, then this top figure 8. Even if you're on an analog capsule, you have to duplicate it, make 2 of them, and you flip one out of phase. Now you're probably going like, all right, well, what does that do? Well, I'm going to show you, these are the 2 capsules that are technically should be out of phase. Now, I've moved them around a little bit, so I'll have to put them, make sure they are in phase, but this is a great test for you to see how that works. It's important that in your MS setup, as you move your levels around, you do not move the levels of the 3 mics or the 2 mics broken out into 3, so the MS stays together. So here is the top mic, which is in phase. Okay, so now I'm going to add the same mic, which is now flipped out of phase. And you want to make, as you bring up those 2 channels, the audio should disappear. And that's how you know they're in true MS mode. So when you add the bottom capsule, now you have a wide stereo image. So we're just going to move that one up for you. Let's hear them both together. All right, that looks like the sweet spot of both of them together. Now, because I've grouped these together, I'm going to move up the center channel until I like it. And then once I let it go, doesn't matter what I do in the mix, those 3 mics, keep them separate so I can move the ambience of that MS within that, and I don't upset the balance of the 2 mics that are out of phase. Now, I don't have anything on the channel, so they've come out of my system, and that box on the Vanguard, technically MS ready. And I'm just making sure in my digital DAW that they are accurately canceling out. So this way, when I make them stereo, they'll be wide. Because right now they're mono, straight up in the middle. That's how you can check if they're in truly MS. So now I'm going to bring up the center mic. Now I'm about to pull the 2 mics that were no sound out of and make them left and right. And that image is going to come screaming in left and right. I know it's kind of some black magic stuff. I have no idea. You hear that? That's both of them out of phase. But now you bring up the center. So the thing about MS is to taste. There's a lot of matrix boxes you can get out there that people make, and Electrical Audio, Steve Albini Studio, has one that is just so wide you almost have to bring it in. So that being said, when you set this up, I'm just setting this up the way I like it, and that is your, that is your style of doing it. How wide, how deep. MS is really cool. It was used a long time ago, and people don't really use it now. Works really great on like a single organ coming out of one amp. It really makes it 3D. Can use on a violin, on a guitar, on a vocal, anything. If you want to take the time to do the MS, most engineers now are just, wham, bam, thank you, man, let's get out of here. And they're not going to take the time. I love engineering. I love recording. So I'm adding this MS, and I am planning on using it a lot more on most records I work on. So that being said, I'm going to mix it in with the rest of the drums. It's not going to be perfect, but if you're mixing it, you can do any way you want, but I do think it's useful. So here's the drums with everything in, and I'm grouping them outside the MS so I could solo them and it does not affect the MS. So let's start with the regular drums, and then I'm going to bring the MS in. I love that. I mean, like I said, I am just feeling around on where sonically I want it to sit, but it really puts a great tool from your toolbox to be using during mixing. And these are just microphones, and these are all cool. So just a basic rundown. We went to the Alien 8s and the Capsule 8 on the kick drum. The Peluso was on the snare. Lawton 308s on the toms. We have the MyLab as a center overhead. We have my vintage AKG 224E on the ride because it is a ride banger. And then we have the Mojave MA37 on the floor. And then I duplicated that to get the room sound. And then actually the V44 was about maybe a foot farther, and it kind of was sitting above the kick drum about maybe 5 feet out. So that's the drums, that's the rundown. I think they sound smoking cool. So now we're going to get on to the bass guitar. On the bass guitar, I ran Mondo through this beautiful unit here. This is an Audioscape V-Comp, and this is a massive tube unit that it just adds depth to the bass. We're going to rock Mondo, and here he is. Mondo's a beast. So on Mondo, I just use the Waves LA2A. It really just gets the job done. I love it on the... Ooh, nasty. So what happened right there is DIs are always crazy and they're always biting. My thing that I use that just wins all the time is I use an R bass. And I use it, once again, musically to taste, adding some low end. And also it seems as soon as you engage the R bass, it takes a little bit of that snap off the bass. I also added a de-esser, which is Once again, why? It's because I can. Cutting about 3,500, and there's a snap that basses always have. So I put a de-esser on it just to round it off, and it's always nasty. And then, of course, I add a Sam's amp, which is just, once again, to taste how much grit I'm going to put on it. Since my guitars were already raunchy, I didn't go that far on Mondo's bass, but to hear the bass one more time by itself, check it out. And I'll take the distortion on and off, and you hear the R bass on and off, and I'll do the de-esser off and on. Engage the de-esser. Turned off the LA waves, but I do have the signal low because I'm going to blast it later. And that's kind of the Manny style too, is if you notice on my system, you're going to see things screaming in red. I don't have a modern day system here. I have a Pro Tools system, what's called an HD rig, probably early 2000s. They used to cost about $40,000. Now you can get them for like $1,000 or $1,500. But anyways, every great studio that did probably most of the great records in the early 2000s, they had one. And it has these huge converters. They're 192s. And they're massive, and it's a kind of a hardware. So as you see me screaming on my Pro Tools below on the converters, it just seems to have a little bit of leeway. I think I've got 5 to 10 dBs of screaming room of audio. So if you see it blasting here, take it with a grain of salt. When you have your own session, and if you happen to get anything I've ever done, definitely lower it down to a threshold that's proper on your system where it's not in the red, and then you could work around that and it should be fine. But like I said, I'm making my system work for myself, and that just happens away. So when you hear Mondo screaming, he's screaming, but it's working. All right, so now we're going to get over to the guitars. One last thing about the drums. When I did this mic locker and I chose this song, a lot of it was to be able to lean into some of these mics. I mean, I can't tell you how my friends have been raving about the Dr. Alien mic. And the fact that I got 2 of them, I thought it was super important that we do something that the kick drum has a beat and a backbeat and it pulses and it really rocks. And you got to admit, I mean, unless I was doing like Rock and Roll by Led Zeppelin or something, or Lust for Life by Iggy Pop, this is a great example of to utilize that separation of the kick, the snare, the beat, the overheads, Mondo's bass. Even though I didn't get a chance to run Mondo into a bass rig and put some of the mics on it, that'll be for probably another episode. I'll be able to use the Alien 8 on the bass, which I'm excited for. So now that we get into guitars, so there's no smoking mirrors. My guitar sound was running through, once again, the bass was tracked with the Audioscape V-Comp, and then I am blessed to have serial number 1, which is crazy, is this V78. And this is basically a stereo compressor. And I used to have the original 1178. So you're wondering how I got 001, as I love the guys at Audioscape. And when they told me they were thinking about making this, I offered if I can send my vintage one to them, which I really loved. And they basically had it for a few months, and they were able to, I don't think they really duplicated off mine, but mine was a great example. So as they designed this and did their magic, which they do really great, they were able to match where I can't really tell the difference. So my guitars were crucial that I track them through this 1178. Now I have 3 mics, and obviously this is just a stereo compressor. While below it is a 76D, and this is another Audioscape compressor. So I have these 2 compressors on 3 mics on my system. On the microphones, I have the first one was the Capsule 8 by Dr. Alien, and that was going into the 76D. Then I had the Peluso P414 going in Audioscape AS78. And then in the other channel, because I threw in a old 60s BK5 ribbon mic, and hey, why not? So I ran that in the other side. Yes, definitely we are having our caviar with the audio. So that's how I set it up here. And which was really, these really do work during tracking. Now, obviously, while I'm mixing, the only thing I'm running outside of the Pro Tools is a C2 or an Allen Smart. But technically in the mixing world, I'm mixing everything you hear in the box. But tracking it with the microphones and committing to the sound really make me happy. So that's why you'll see this Audioscape gear behind me, because I track with it and I love tracking with it. But mostly for rocking guitars, oh my God, you cannot get enough of this 1178, and I loved it, and you'll hear it. Manny, let's get to it. So that's how the guitars were broken out. No smoking mirrors here. I didn't know how the Dr. Alien mics, I've never used them before. So yeah, I have a very particular guitar sound that's crazy. It eats up microphones, it eats up rigs. Some mics do not sound good. So when I did the Dr. Alien capsulate on the guitar rig, I had no idea what it would do. When I tracked it, it's live, the speakers are blasting, I'm just going for it. And now, maybe even with you, I get to appreciate the mic. But my feeling was, this mic was incredible. Because it's a figure 8, it's picking up the front and the back of the sound coming out of the speaker. And that's what a ribbon mic does. So you could say it had it's kind of like my BK5 ribbon mic, but actually that's not a figure 8, that's a bad example, but it still has that dark, thick, big sound because of the low end that's still coming behind. Low end builds up farther away as opposed to being up close. And I think this mic really does it. So enough said. Here is Dr. Alien Capsule. You know, that sounds, for me, I love that sound, and I don't know what that is. That is he makes alien mics. That is a mic from outer space. Oh my God. I am not even lying. That is like something you'd want to have 3 or 4 of those, because he just really gets the job done on a really tough guitar. My guitar could just be brutal. So that's the Dr. Alien C Capsule. It's a new mic. He has short runs of them, so if you are interested in one, definitely put in a bid for it and try to get one. But that mic was rocking. So next up on my guitars was Peluso's P414 with the brass capsule. Now, a dynamic and a condenser, they're definitely different mics, different technologies. Condensers are way more sensitive to sound. So when you hear it, I always kind of imagine like a dynamic having all this fog, and then the condenser comes up and it's like cleared away and it's the essentials. So that's the way I feel about condensers. And I usually love to have a ribbon, a condenser, and a dynamic if I can. And that's why you see this combo as opposed to me not including the BK5. But I think it's good to have some kind of reference to what you're getting. So here is the Peluso P414 on my guitars. Now I'm going to add in the Dr. Alien Capsule 8. So that's crazy. They sound, and that's the thing, like when I get to the last mic, you'll hear why I put 3 mics on a small little amp. So now we're to the BK5, even though that's not one of the mics technically we'll be showcasing. It's a classic. Soundgarden Super Unknown, if you like, Black Hole Sun, BK5 on everything on that record. That was a BK5 and probably a 57 or 56 in coordination with whatever they use. So I love the BK5. So here's the BK5 RCA 60s vintage ribbon by itself. I'm going to add the Capsule 8 and the Peluso. So now I'm going to play them back. I'm going to go back to the beginning. That section probably isn't the best example of hearing the mayhem that they do. So here's the mics. I'll add them, bring them in kind of how I had it mixed. I was definitely leaning in the Dr. Alien Capsule 8. I'm bringing up the P414 to add some clarity. And then the ribbon is just to round off just the harshness. And I just love the way they sound. So let me take those out and I'll start to add them in. And that's why, without any trickery of adding any kind of automation, 1 microphone, 2 microphone, and then 3 together, and you get a wall of sound. And this is just a fact. It's black magic. I don't know. Here we go. Okay, this is old school. I know most engineers, when you have like a hectic schedule and you put a 57 up and, there's not a lot of believers in what I just showed you. Some of it has to do with time restraints and just how much energy you're going to put into it. I love recording with multiple mics. It doesn't mean I'm committed to that when I'm mixing it. I did, like I said, I favored the Capsule 8 by Dr. Alien, and then I brought my BK5 in second, and then I have the Peluso filling it up. But like I said, when you play one of them as opposed to 3 or even 2 of them, huge difference. So then when you play it all together with the music, So when you're listening to this, you hear my guitars all the way over to the right, but you know when I was playing the mix, you heard this little funny business over on the left-hand side. So obviously, when you were listening to that take, the guitars were all the way over to the right, but when you listen to the track, there is a left guitar. I love to do this thing, which is just splitting the audio. I'll run all the sounds to an auxiliary, and I'll add a time delay, and just to feel or to taste, I move and slide the time around until it feels good to me. I know it's exaggerated and it's a little strange, but I'm a little strange, and I'm producing it, I'm mixing it, and guess what? Daddy gets to do what he wants. So I'm doing a crazy left-handed delay that just sounds psycho and weird. So I'm going to play it with you with the guitars all right, and then I'll bring in that left guitar so you can get the imagery. Let me go to a kind of a cooler part. So I'm going to play it around somewhere in the middle. Here we go, without the left side, just guitars on the right. Sorry, it makes me, I can't tell you how crazy that sounds, and I love it. So anyways, I'm into it.
Hey guys, I'm Cole and I own a business called Colpix Vintage where I do repairs on ribbon and dynamic microphones. Manny asked me to come on and give just a quick pitch of my services. So if you need any help with any ribbons or dynamics, I work on a lot of AKG D12s, anything like that, any microphone that you need re-ribboned, I can help you out. Hopefully you enjoyed watching this video of Manny's mic locker. I'm certainly pumped to check out all the videos. And yeah, again, if you need any help with any microphone repairs, I'm here to help. You can go to my website, colpixvintage.com.
Well, that's all she wrote. Manny's mic locker number 2 in the books. Thank you, Horn Ewart. Thank you, Produce Like a Pro, for having me on your platform. Thank you, Lawton Microphones, Dr. Alien, and Peluso for sending us out your mics. We threw them to the wolves, my band, the Chavez Ravine. Big props to Mondo Lopez and Phil Guerrero for performing that with me. I want to thank Mojave and Vanguard. We snuck their mics in from episode 1, but it's my show. I can do what I want. Yeah, I brought in some other mics. Hey. So anyways, I hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned for episode number 3 coming soon. My name is Manny Nieto. If you didn't know, my studio is called Suplex Audio. If you want to find me on Instagram. And my own microphone company is called Original Gravity Wave Microphone Company. And my band's called the Chavez Ravine. That's a full pimp. I'll see you on episode number 3.